morning, everybody, and welcome to this leadership episode of 30 Minutes to President's Club. My name is Armand Farouk, and I'm here with my co-host, Mark Costaglo. And today, we have someone who has a way that if you score a deal over a 40 momentum score, it means that your deal is likely to have a 70+% win rate. And he broke down exactly how to build a momentum score framework in this episode. His name is Rex. He is the CRO over at Consensus. Mark, why should people listen?
I think that Rex has kind of figured it out. He's realized that the major change in sales over the last few years is we've gone from seller-centric to buyer-centric environment. And I think he's tuned his sales org to what the buyers need to do rather than what the sellers need to be doing.
And 3, 2, 1, let's roll. Alrighty, Rex, welcome to the show. We start every show with your top 3 actionable leadership takeaways. Let's get your 3.
Okay, number 1, I would say time box Slack and email beyond the first hour. So one of the things that I've made a huge mistake on is right when I wake up, I pick up my phone and I let Slack and email dictate my day. Days that start that way end up not being as productive. So what I would say is exercise and show how much discipline you have by waiting and making sure that you've prioritized your day. Most people don't, 90% of people will not write down or document what they're going to do in that day. They let the email and Slack dictate it. What I've done for at least the last year, I try to wake up every morning and refrain from that and get myself in the right state of mind and make sure that I'm working on the 20% of things that are going to move the needle 80%.
You know, I'm tempted to ask about it now, but I'm going to time block that to after your 3rd takeaway. So what's number 2?
Perfect. The second is what a lot of people call Ohio, only handle it once. This is a very small thing that makes a huge impact. A lot of times when it comes to sales cycles, days can be the difference between losing a deal and winning a deal. I'll give you 2 examples of how you handle something once. Number 1 is when it comes to proposals. When you counter, you always counter with something that is executable. And when they counter offer, you tell them that they have to send something that is executable as well. That's the only thing you'll take back to leadership and finance. That removes cycles in between the negotiation phase. The second is just scheduling a little meeting. I can't tell you how many times I've gone through calls and I've looked through sales cycles and seen that it's just days before people can get something on the calendar. One thing you can do that's very easy is when you send an invite out, just send a time that you think works and tell them that you have the right to change that any way you want. Just give them your self-scheduling link and tell them they can even send times at work, but remove back and forth. Make it your scheduling a 1 email transaction and you'll save yourself a few days on every single deal cycle.
What's number 3?
Number 3 is modifying your sales stages to be based on buyer actions. Seller actions are yards. Buyer actions are points on the scoreboard. Yards will never win you points. It's only getting in the end zone. So what the buyer does matters. So you have to go into your sales stages and look and make sure that no stage can be progressed to unless a buyer has taken a certain action. And that's going to take some planning. You're going to have to look at the actions that make the most impact. But once you find out what are the 5, 6, 7 actions that a buyer takes that lets you know that they've moved forward, make those requirements. The seller actions are only bonuses. Seller actions do not represent points or ARR on the board. What the buyer does matters most above everything else.
Could you give that vendor review example to finish it off?
Vendor
It was
review?
like a deal doesn't move into this stage until an economic buyer is brought into the sales. Like it was the same example you gave in the prep.
Yes. Another thing to think about too is that who takes the action matters. So for example, when you move into verbal, just because a champion says the deal is going to happen, you have to decide which type of person. So if you're a MedPIC organization, you have to decide what an economic buyer is, and it has to be tracked in the system and some type of document or some type of call that can be attributed that would prove that you moved into that stage. And then at that point, it's measurable, and everything going into verbal will have very similar close rates and motions because it is measurable.
Rex, we've definitely moved into a new environment of sales in the last year or two. And I think one of the things that I really identified with that you just talked about was seller activity is really kind of meaningless if you don't have reciprocal buyer activity that moves the deal forward. And the law, the point of diminishing return, has lowered so far on sales activity that, back in the day, 7-8 years ago, we could just do more, get more revenue. Now, if we do more, we actually turn buyers off, we get less revenue. So you have this kind of concept called momentum, which I think is a really cool idea of how to understand if a deal's working well, rather than looking back and being like, well, we sent 18 emails and had 14 phone calls and you sent 17 texts. We must be really rocking in this deal. That activity no longer helps us that much. So help me understand what momentum is and how you track it.
Yeah, so this is something I give a lot of credit to our RevOps team. Matt Lauer and Jacob Landy on our team really changed. RevOps, by the way, if you don't have a RevOps function and you can get one, it's life-changing in terms of how you run your business. The way that I used to run sales when I was new, trying to figure things out, I used to think, measure how many calls it takes to get to a certain stage or how many proposals have to go out. And it was everything based on what we did. We flipped the script on this because the data showed us that what we do had a much less impact on what the deal did than what the buyer did. And so what we created was something called the momentum score. And what it did is it measured 7 to 10 of the key buyer actions that we saw moved a deal more than anything else. And what we did is we just created a score. It wasn't perfect at first. We kind of made it up as we went. But as we started building it, it started shaping itself and more actions started to come forward. And what we learned is that the score ranged somewhere between 0 and 100, that when our scores reached 40, the close rate was 70%. And so what we saw is we started seeing incongruency between what some reps would say the deal's stage was in. So it'd say verbal, which is normally an 85, 90% close rate for us, but then their momentum was lower. Momentum won out almost every single time. And so what we were able to do is when we went on one-on-ones, we'd say, why does our momentum score project this and you project that? And it created coaching moments that you could say, let's go look at that. And sometimes if it was wrong, we could tweak the model. But the main thing is when you're growing your organization, when I was smaller, I knew every deal. And it's hard not to know every deal. Now, it's hard to see a deal come through and be like, man, I could have been a part of that. And that's something that you have to do as a leader. So as you manage it, you have to be more data-centric and you have to be able to know what are the actions that are moving the needle. And this momentum score is a great way to do it. And the fundamentals are measure it based on buyer actions.
So I love this. Can you give me some examples of those 7 to 10 buyer actions that are in your score? Like if I wanted to create this, like what have you learned are the top ones that we need to have in there?
Yeah, like how do you even calculate your momentum score?
Yeah, so because of the product that we use, we send a demo. If the demo's watched, we've learned that there's a 34% likelihood that they'll show to the first meeting. So, and if they share it, it goes to 81%. So from an SDR to an AE, our SDRs are constantly trying to get them to watch the demo before the first meeting. So it's a little trailer because the show rate is higher and also the likelihood of another stakeholder joining increases because they start sharing it and people want. So that's one example. Another example is who says yes when it comes to a verbal. And normally, because we have sales ears as a salesperson, if you're not disciplined, any yes you will mark up as a verbal. And what we've learned is we use MedPick. An economic buyer is someone who has the authority to run a budget and make a budgeting decision. And until that is proven, we will not move something into verbal. And so those are the 2 buyer actions that we calculate into our scoring.
So this is really good. Could you give a couple of more, and then I want to talk about if I wanted to build this on my own. But like number 1 is demo, watch, and share. So that's something really early in the sales cycle. Something later in the sales cycle is who says yes to a verbal. So it's not like an analyst saying yes to a verbal. It's probably someone with a VP or a C something in their title. Are there 1 or 2 other variables that you find that are pretty common in sales organizations that you should put in your momentum score?
The one I would say is kind of like that I see consistent across every organization is the frequency of communication. If there is a cadence of communication and that dips, that is almost always a bad sign. One of the things you have to watch for, and it goes into our momentum score, is if the cadence of communication changes at any moment. And so You have to look at how frequent. I can almost tell you the health of a deal, and I don't even have to read the emails. If I go through the activity and I just see things slowing down, companies, when they get closer to close, the activity tends to ramp up. Discussions keep going, more calls keep happening. If you're the one dragging your champion into calls, you should be the first one worried, and you should directly talk to your champion and say, I'm worried. Our data shows that and our experience shows that our cadence of communication increases. I'm seeing it slow down. Is this something we should be worried about? And a lot of times they'll either be like, you know what, something happened, or they may give you a good excuse of like someone went on a vacation. But you should be the first one worried if you see the communication drop at all.
And that would be email flow, meeting flow, all of that kind of stuff, right? Not just, hey, are we having a meeting every 2 weeks? We're looking at like several factors inside there.
Yes. If you're the one that's pushing the communication at the end, there's probably a problem if you're pushing it too much. When companies are excited and you've convinced them that you're a game-changing product, their interest level typically, and that's what we saw in our buyer actions, is deals that closed, buyer activity went up in terms of calls, emails. Deals that were lost in the tail end, it's staggering. You can see the dots. There's no middle ground. It either goes up or it goes down. And if it goes down, we call it our early warning system. Our CRM will ping you, and we're getting better at it. It will ping you and tell you a red flag has come up that would tell us that this deal is not in the shape that it was maybe a week ago.
So Rex, I'm curious, we've got 3 or 4 different signals, but they're not the traditional MedPick ones that I would have expected, where it's like metrics or economic. It's like watch and share the demo. It's like frequency and cadence of communication. And if I'm a sales leader and I'm trying to build a momentum score for my organization, it sounds like you've got 7 to 10 of these different factors. How did you figure out that these were the 7 to 10 predictive factors and not other parts of MedPick, for example? Or why not just use MedPick as your predictive factors?
MedPick was the beginning, but what we learned is that not all companies are the same, and not all cycles are the same, and not all buyers are the same. What I would say is you just need to start. And so the first thing I'd say is pull up your Lucid chart or your Miro board or whatever it is, and go get your top AEs, your top CSMs, go get your RevOps person to kind of put some data and just say, hey, everyone, I want you to tell me what actions have you seen that are unmistakable signs towards a deal moving forward and signs that a deal is moving backwards. And so those are going to be the red flags and the white flags. And then you create those. And then the next step is, once you've determined, and I'd keep it short, I wouldn't make it too complex, maybe 5 to 10 to start out. Then you grade them. So create a 100% scoring system and have everybody vote what percent, take the average of that. And then as the leader, if you've been there for a long time, you can be a little bit more judicious how you want to move it, but kind of get a feel and then run it. And then you can run it retroactively and see how accurate it was. So go look at previous deals and see, when I ran the score, did high scores yield a higher close rate, and did low? And if that is, then you got something, and then you just keep building on it. So step 1, brainstorm, figure out those things. Number 2, score it. 3, run it, and then let your RevOps team go to work, or your operational minded person go to work, and then start putting together something that's actually measurable, someone who knows statistics and how to really do it at scale, and make sure you're getting the feeling out of it. And me, I'm a feeling CRO naturally. And if you're one of those, you got to be very careful and have someone with you that can kick you off that feeling train and get you on the data train when you're going through this exercise.
Give me like what this means. You just said if it's over 40 of a 70% win rate, like how often do people get to 40? Is that like something that they feel like they can control, or is it just an observation? And then like, tell me like the juxtaposition, like if it's 10, what is the win rate?
Yeah, so we have 4 major categories. We have a 10, an 18, a 29, and a 40 score. A 10 is a 13% close rate. An 18 is a 20% close rate. A 29 is a 40%. And you just get up to that 40 mark, and it quickly starts going in the right direction. So what it does is it helps you focus. You know, one of the tips that I shared was time boxing and making sure that you do the right things. If the buyer behavior isn't where it needs to be, get out of your normal motion of following what you do every day. You keep making actions until the behaviors that need to happen. And normally I think we've been programmed, because we've seen it in CRMs, that stages look like SQL and it looks at exploration. We're programmed to think that we're making progress if it moves along traditional stages. The world has changed where the buyer is in control now. They choose the way that they want to engage. And so you need to focus on the playbooks that will move the buyer behavior.
I was just going to ask, we have this delta, right? So you talk about these coaching moments. All right, I'm committing this, which means, I'm going to close it. But then we go look at the momentum score and it's below 29, which means we know we have a, less than a 30% chance to win the deal. So give me an idea of like what that conversation looks like, and like what is the direct coaching that you can give a rep to help them understand how to get that momentum score up and increase their ability to win the deal.
So Dan Hickson is our VP of sales that I work with, and he does an amazing job and a lot of this is his brainchild. We have a one-on-one dashboard, and right towards the top of it is the momentum score. We look at it every single week. In the one-on-ones, we look at where they're at in the stage and if the momentum score is moving. The one thing that you can get advanced at is eventually over time, you can show momentum, how it's trending. So when we first did it, it was just what was the momentum at a moment in time. So a 29 momentum score at stage 2 is pretty good. When you're getting to the late stages and you've been in cycle for 120 days, that's not a good score. That means it's in a bad spot. So timing is a big piece. So in the one-on-one, when the stage is late and the momentum is low, we would say we need to go do a deep dive into this account. And that's where we start breaking out the visual maps and looking and figuring out. And that's where we get involved. If everything is aligned, we kind of let that go and we guide so we're watching we don't just go from deal 1 to deal 2 or biggest deal to smallest deal. We go to the deals that aren't in line with the data and the momentum score. Because you're working, let's say, $1 million deal, but if everything's going as planned, let the rep cook, right? If it's a big deal, but what they're feeling and what their stage is saying is different than the momentum score, that's where your coaching comes in. You have to pick your coaching moments. You can't coach every deal every time, and the rep has to show some autonomy. Your job is to help give them that advice when the data and the stage don't line up.
Rex, one thing that I think would be helpful is, so you're CRO over at Consensus. You have a VP of sales as well. I'm curious, like at each level, from like manager to director to VP to you, like what deals are each level involved? Because my guess is there are probably at least a couple of deals you're still involved in, like the really, really, really key ones. But like, how do you make sure you're not stepping on your VP's toes? How do you make sure your VP isn't stepping on your director's toes? And like all of that, what does that look like at each level?
So this is a very difficult one that took us time. I've been with Consensus for 9 years. I came in as a VP. The company shrunk 3 times and I became a VP with a title, but I was basically an AE. I had to rebuild it back up, and then eventually we hired another rep, and then we got a team and everything. My default position is to get involved with deals. That's where I like to be. That's where my natural state is. So there is some times where there's some bumping into one another. I would say when it comes to when we get involved, it's really based on kind of our negotiation playbook. I'm a big fan of leveling. If you're going to bring a decision maker to the table, they better be bringing a decision maker to the table. If you reveal your CEO or your CFO at the wrong time, you will shoot yourself in the foot. We actually have this concept that I integrated called the 3 rings. I believe that every single deal will ring the negotiation towel at least 3 times. Your champion will, the procurement will, and the final signer will. And you have to have enough juice in that towel for every ring, because each one has to come out a winner. And you have to have 3 levels. So think about the walls. The first wall breaks, the second, the third, and then you have to kind of end where you need to be. And so that is something that we talk about all the time, is make sure you build your proposals to withstand 3 rings, and make sure that you layer in the leadership at the right time. If you think the champion's negotiation is the one that's going to be pen to paper. It will not, because everybody has to show their contribution to it. And it's typically 3 rings, and that's the champion, procurement, and the signer.
So if I'm a rep and I'm thinking, I've got to bring in someone in on a deal, right? How does your rep know if they should bring in their manager, their VP, or possibly bring you in? Because they're probably not bringing in the whole chain of command. It sounds like matching power with power is the main way that you're doing that, where like if they're bringing in a C-level at an enterprise account, we're bringing in Rex. Is that how you're doing it, or are there other things that I should think about?
Yeah, it's the same thing with referrals. Like, don't bring in your referral when someone's just kind of evaluating. They have to be literally ready to sign on the line pending some type of bad referral or reference. So yes, what I would say is it's only fair that if you want to move up into, the director manager level, is that's kind of how we'll return it in kind. And then one of the things that we always try to do, that if you're going to bring a decision maker on from our side that actually has budget control, they should be doing the same. And so it's kind of nuanced in that way. But what I've learned is if you bring somebody in too early, the 3 rings have to happen. And if you get to your 3 rings before they get to theirs, then you're in a bad spot.
Yeah,
You got to line those up.
Our CEO would, I was early stage selling at a company called Pave, and sometimes we would make the mistake of bringing our CEO into a negotiation with like a champion. And you can't let your CEO be at the first ring, because 1, they're going to give everything away for free. And then 2, you can't build up the big boss, right? You need to be able to build up the big boss and be like, that's to your point of only doing something once. When you say like, hey, I'm going to bring in my CEO or my CRO to like finalize this agreement, there is some like epic finality of bringing in the big boss. But if that person's been there the entire time, it's like, oh, you're going to go see Rex for the 17th time in the sales cycle, but this time he really means business, I promise. It doesn't have the same weight to it if they've been there the whole time.
Yeah, it's amazing, because you can do this backwards too. You bring on too early, you bring on too late. I have reps whose personalities is like, I want to go out, hunt it, kill it, bring it back, and cook it myself. And that can be a huge mistake. I also have people who, like, I want to get any executive at any moment into the meeting. And I would say, if you're an early deal cycle and they say, hey, I can get you the CRO right now, you shouldn't jump on that right away. If things are not in place, if a top leader comes in and doesn't feel like this is mature enough, you may shoot yourself in the foot. So you have to do things in their proper order. I remember when we were first starting at Consensus and we didn't have great security, we weren't SOC 2 compliant. And I used to say, man, I hope they don't ask. I hope that I'm not going to bring the call up. I'm not going to bring it up. I'm just going to hope they sign it. They never did. And so what I learned is that you be bold enough and you bring it up first. If you start going to your champions and you're bringing up objections before they do, they will trust you. If you try to hide objections, they will always think twice. And so when it comes to objections and deal cycles, that's a big deal. And the same thing with bringing people in. Timing matters. Just because you can get a high-level executive on a call on either side does not mean that you should. You need to know and document, what is the role I play? I always tell the team, you're the quarterback. I'm not running this deal. You are running it. You tell me the play that I'm going to run. Because they think higher title means quarterback. And I'm like, no. You tell me the role I play. Am I a bad cop? Am I a good cop? Am I supposed to just kind of show that we're going to drive support? Am I negotiating? I can't tell how many times I've been on calls where they're just like, okay, Rex is here. He's going to just figure this out. And then I look like an idiot. And so me as a leader, you should have prep calls where you have a game plan and you've mapped out where this is going to go and you know whose role is going to be what. And write those down. Write down, what are those roles? What is the role that each person's going to play? And if you put the prep in, the call will go much better.
So I've got one last question for you, which is, we've talked about everything from you were in the earlier days, you were basically acting as an AE. You've got this like higher level management deal to deal where you've got your momentum score. You don't check Slack or email on the first day. Sometimes you get involved in key deals. There are a million different things that you could be doing as a CRO on any given day. And I know it's obviously going to vary whether it's end of quarter, board meeting, not, et cetera. But like, do you have some framework for how a senior revenue leader should be spending their day, whether it's deep work in the morning or something like that? What would like an example day of projects, deals, and all of that stuff look like in your world?
So if there's one thing that you could learn from what we talked about today, there's a book called Procrastinate on Purpose. It's written by Rory Vaden. I've never met him. If he listens to this podcast, I'd love to meet you. He has some really good information. But what the main takeaway is that there's no such thing as time management. Time will move the way it moves no matter what you do. What you do is insignificant in terms of how time moves. There is self-management that will make it feel like you're multiplying your time. There's a concept in the book called the focus funnel. And at the top of the focus funnel, there is eliminate. So you take all your major tasks. I do this at least once a year. And I say, what can I eliminate? Do I still need to do that? Do I still need to put napkins in the break room for my startup? Probably not. If you can eliminate it, the next phase is, can you automate it? And we live in a day of automation. There's a lot you can automate. We live in the day of AI, which can automate a ton. And then the next is, can you delegate it? Can you actually, and should you delegate it? If it makes it through all three, there's two choices. You can procrastinate it. Should I actually do this right now? And if not, then schedule it for another time. If you have to do it, what you'll realize is most of the stuff you're working on will not make it to your list of what you need to do right now. So at our business, we do something called an impact tracker. All the leadership does it. It's the 3 to 5 outcomes that you need to have that week that will change the company's trajectory. We hold each other accountable to that every single week. And I run some of those activities through eliminate, automate, delegate. If you get a chance, you can Google it, just put focus funnel. It will show you what it looks like. Go through the exercise. I've done this in my own personal life. And I started automating bill pay. I started delegating these things. I started eliminating things I shouldn't be doing. I started unsubscribing to things so I don't have to delete them every time. And it applies to every part of your life, from business to just your day-to-day, to your kids' schedules, to your spouse's schedules, to your significant other's schedules. The focus funnel is huge. We live in a very fast-paced world, and if you don't manage it, the things that don't matter tend to take over.
Dude, amazing show. We have to move to the final question. And we talked about one great habit there, a ton of other really good habits, but what is one bad habit that every sales leader should break so that all sales teams can get a little bit better?
The bad habit that you need to break is to get over yourself that you think that you can affect a deal. The buyer's actions affect the deal more than anything. The t-shirt that says I close deals doesn't apply today. You don't close anything. The buyer does. If you can just make that shift to say, I am the tour guide to the purchase. My job is to help them. So just like a coach isn't the one that's putting the ball into the basket, that's the role that you play as the seller. Your buyers are the ones that are going through all the actions. The data shows that over 83% of what happens in a purchase happens without you present. So you need to coach up your champions. You need to be there for them, because what you do at the end of the day will have little significance if a deal closes or not. It has everything to do with what they do.
Rex, amazing show. Everyone hang on for a 60-second recap coming up soon. Alrighty, Mark, it's time for a 2x2 recap from this episode with Rex from Consensus. What do you have for your 2?
Great reminder. Don't check Slack and email right when you wake up, and definitely don't check it right before you go to bed. I got a Slack like 3 nights ago and I didn't sleep because I shouldn't have read it. It didn't need me to read it at that time. It screwed up my whole night. So like, listen, good reminder. Don't get on Slack and stuff before you kind of get through your morning routine of what you need to do that day. And then secondly, buyer action is greater than seller action. And our job as sellers is to get buyers to act, not to just do activity for activity's sake so that we can say we sent 17 emails in the last 2 weeks. And so I think that, that part of his talk track of how he really thinks that buyers' actions are touchdowns and seller actions are yards, I thought was really good.
Number 3, the momentum score. So you want to come up with the 7 to 10 variables that impact your deal the most. For example, in Rex's case, if someone watched the demo before the first discovery call, that's some points. If a specific EB said yes to a verbal, that's more points than just a champion. Add it up and just start iterating and figuring out what are the most predictive elements of what gets your deals over the line. So that's number 3. And then number 4 is your deal has to survive the 3 rings of the towel. Ring number 1 is the champion's going to want a piece. Ring number 2 is the procurement is going to want a piece. And then ring number 3 is the final signer is going to want a piece. So you got to make sure that you have enough rings on your side. So don't bring your CEO on the first call if that's the first negotiation cut. Alrighty, Mark, one thing that people can do is Consensus actually put out a really, really good report that showed you like 6 things that you can do in your demo to massively increase your win rates. And it's a really good follow-up resource to this. I'm going to put that down in the show notes. And folks, we will see you on the next one.
Later.